Hey guys, how's it going?
Howdy.
Yeah, no, I muted you for a second. But we're going to be talking about the Last of Us episode 3, Long Time. What is that? Oh, that's you.
Let's start by wishing the family of Annie Wershing condolences with her passing. She was 45, died of cancer. She was the original voice actor / motion capture for Tess from the video game of The Last of Us.
Yeah, they had a thing on that on HBO I saw. So yes, definitely.
She's done some other work too. She was the Borg Queen in the Picard TV series recently, and I think there was another show she was on for a long time on.
Oh yeah, she's been in a lot of things. It's just
that's her connection to our podcast.
Since we're talking about The Last of Us, might as well.
Give her condolences, yeah. So this episode was interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't bad. But for people who played the game, this was the most veered or not canon, I guess, to the game, as possible. I didn't mind the route. It made a lot of sense if I thought about it. In the game, just to let you know, Sean, Bill is a character that you meet. Obviously, and you like follow us. What's up?
Just Bill.
Just Bill. You hear about Frank?
Okay.
The resolution is the same-ish. You need to get a car. They hit like the main point of this, but they more focused on developing the story or these characters in the show versus developing one character, and you get to hear about his past in the game. So yeah, definitely different direction, and very interesting that they chose to do this. But like I said, I think it was probably for the better if I thought about it from a story standpoint, from a film standpoint. But anyways, this episode had multiple parts. It had different timelines jumping from 2023, which is present, to the outbreak 2003, and did 3 to 4 year jumps each time. What were your thoughts on the episode, both of you? Sean, I guess we'll start with you.
I quite liked it. I have a few little nitpicks, but fundamentally, I liked it. I think it's neat that it's almost like a self-contained short story.
Yes.
Which made me a little suspicious of how connected to the game it was. I thought that it might be an elaboration on these characters that the game didn't have. I was just trying to imagine, what character are you playing for all this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I felt like it had to be an elaboration, maybe some stuff that happened off screen or something that took a step further, or something maybe the game makers even had ideas for but couldn't work it into gameplay or something. I was a little surprised that, spoiler alert, I don't know if anyone's watching this without having seen the show or played the game, but we're about to spoil it.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised when they both died.
Yes.
Because again, it made me wonder. I guess we did see through some flashbacks that Joel and Tess had gone to visit them, and it seemed like it was maybe a regular thing even. And so maybe that's how the game handled it. But anyway, overall, I thought it was the stories and the characters were interesting. It did a little bit of sort of world building and fleshing out, the types of things that might be going on around the world, and to set up the ability for them to finally get some consistent resources, even though every other opportunity they've had to get resources they did not take. And I also like the idea that it kind of stands on its own as a little short story. It's a little extra on my mind. I'm sure there's lots of examples of shows that have done this, but it's particularly on my mind because Mythic Quest has done that. It got 3 seasons, and each season had an episode that sort of was it. I guess in some ways we're still connected, but for example, there's one character. He's supposed to be like a writing consultant for Mythic Quest, and he's like 80, and everyone else is 25 or even 40, but he's just so much older than everyone else. And we get an episode that's like a flashback to the 70s about a young writer, and you eventually realize, oh, it's him in his youth. But and even though it's still him, it's connected. but it's so long ago. It's before video games existed. You know what I mean? So it still stood alone as a separate little short story. But anyway, I didn't mean to go on about that too much. Just the idea that it was neat that they did that. I think it worked well. I think you got to be careful. You can't have every episode being like that, but one season is fine. Maybe two. Maybe you get away with a couple, but
yes. Now, Horn, about you.
This episode was the hardest for me because I loved this episode. This episode had a lot of things that were great about it, but the section in the game for Bill was one of my favorite sections of the game. There's a lot of really interesting things that happen during that. You finally get a shotgun, which, like, in a lot of third-person games, the shotgun is like the holy grail of weapons. But like, he gives you the shotgun, and it becomes like a staple weapon throughout the entire game because it's just a good weapon.
Yeah.
So the fact that he is the one that gives it to you, it gives a lot of meaning to that. There's a lot of interesting stuff. All the Frank stuff and Bill stuff happen in the background. There's very little of it that we actually get to see in the game. So I want to say like 80% of this episode was completely off game.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with the game itself. It was aside from names of characters, potential relationships of characters, and stuff like that.
Yeah, like in the game, you pretty much figured that Bill's gay and his partner was Frank, but I don't know if there was like a concrete, like they stated it, right?
Well, he said, do you do all this alone? He's like, no, I had a partner, Frank.
Yeah, okay.
But then he ran off.
Partner can mean a lot of things,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
so they made it a little ambiguous, but made it clear, definitively clear in this.
Near the end of Bill's story, it gets a little less ambiguous because we find a truck that's the battery just needs to be replaced, which they take a battery out of a military vehicle that still has a good battery, and they're able to get a truck whose tires aren't like completely rotted and is actually able to work, and they pop a clutch on it to get it to start and are able to go. But before you do that, you find Frank's body hanging from a noose and a note saying, "Man, Bill, I hated your guts. I'm so sick and tired of being with you. So I tried to get that dang battery you kept going on about. But you said if I did, it'd be the death of me. And, well, I guess you were right, because I got bit." And he decided to kill himself rather than turn.
Yeah.
And you find this all on a suicide note that you hand to Frank. And when Frank reads that...
Hand to Bill?
Oh, yeah, you hand Frank's note to Bill, and Bill actually kind of chokes up a little bit. And he's like, well, that asshole, like, crumples up the note and chucks it to the side. But, like, they give hints. And then, of course, Ellie pretends that she stole a nudie mag from Bill's place. And on the front is a male figure. So it's kind of hinted at, but it's never directly stated.
Yeah. And like Sean said, it's obvious in this. But I mean, I went into it just knowing that he was, so.
But also, it's nice to see how some people could do this. Like, it makes sense. Like, of course, there would be some people that would try to do something similar to this.
In the show, you mean, right?
In the show, with a post-apocalyptic scenario where they kind of protect an area. And they don't want to go to the quarantine zones. They think they can protect themselves.
Also, a big part of this episode was Bill is like a conspiratist, or he believed in that the government was evil and
a doomsday prepper.
Yeah. So like, and there are people like that, who could, if the world went to shit, I assume they could be self-sufficient. So it's not like this is far-fetched. At least I don't think. Maybe. So.
Not too far-fetched. I think there's a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask Sean, have you watched Parks and Rec?
Yes.
So you know that the person that played Bill was Ron Swanson.
Yeah, and it's a good casting, too, because that's his character type. in Parks and Rec. Kind of
Yeah.
gruff woodsman, independent, anti-government. Not gay, but I don't think his character would be against. Or they probably even through the show at some point addressed it. He wouldn't have a prejudice against gay people.
Yeah.
But he's very independent-minded and anti-establishment and self-sufficient.
I just loved that it was basically just Ron Swanson. It was Ron Swanson in his most preferred habitat for like the first bit of the episode. I loved that.
But yeah, I guess we'll dive, go into it. The episode breakdown by breakdown.
Real quick, another sort of general comment that I want to make that I think is interesting. I don't think this episode could have been made maybe 10 years ago, but not 20 years ago. I don't think HBO would have put that
much effort.
Homosexual relationship on TV, that level of intimacy. Audiences would have accepted that. Even if HBO did take the risk, there would have been backlash. They would have lost a bunch of viewers.
I'll give credit. It's not like I'm gay, but I thought this episode was beautiful. It was just a romance movie, story.
It was just a romance story. It just happened to be two guys. You could have changed Frank out for a female, and nothing would have changed.
Yeah. And I felt like it was tasteful. Like a lot of stuff they did, a lot of choices they made, I guess. For the relationship, film wise and all that. I mean, I enjoyed a lot of those little things they did, for the romance, I guess. I guess anything else before we go scene by scene, roughly?
Just a little something.
What's up?
There's two scenes in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
At the scene where Joel gets to actually mourn Tess's death at the beginning of the episode, does not happen in the game.
I didn't think so either. I didn't think that it happened in the game. Sorry.
Well, no, but the scene where he says, "You don't talk about Tess ever," and then he sets down the ground rules, and she's just like, "What you say goes."
Mm-hmm.
That happens almost immediately after Tess's death.
Okay.
There's no time to mourn. He just goes straight into that big, gruff, and angry. There's very little time for him to mourn and process because he just got out of a firefight, and then he's the scene. So actually letting him have time to mourn Tess, I thought was a really smart move.
Yeah. This is another thing, Sean, that the game, it's a video game. When you go through the areas, you're going through Bill's pretty much storyline. There's traps, but there's also infected, and obviously they pretty much cut that all out. So it could have been this theoretically could have been an action episode, but they chose to go a character-driven episode instead, which I thought was a good. That's why I say it's a good choice. I think
I was very happy for it. I even talked about how I felt like from the first episode to the second episode, there was this shift from world building and character development to zombie horror.
Yeah.
And I hope that they balanced that out. And with this episode, they did. This episode had, I don't know, a minor action scene that wasn't really even zombie based. So
right.
When you said two scenes?
Yes. So the beginning scene where he's mourning, and near the end scene where he's setting the ground rules.
Okay.
He doesn't get that scene at the beginning in the game. He doesn't ever get time to really mourn Tess. But then the scene that's way after all this and he's had time to process, he finally then starts setting the rules. That happens way after the point. And I liked that a lot more because it actually gave Joel more time as a human to process grief.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
And we talked about this a little before, and maybe it's worth clarifying in case someone's watching this for the first time. But I haven't played or seen the game at all. I know virtually nothing about it, and I knew virtually nothing going into the show about the show either. And so I have a little bit of a different perspective. That's why I'm part of this discussion, right? Because I don't have expectations. And so I appreciate, Horn, that since you did have certain expectations from the game, that this might have been a tough episode. Even if it was good, even if you liked it, it still wasn't hitting beats that you hoped for. So I can see that conflict. Overall, I think it's positive for you, though, right?
But like I said, the most mixed emotions for this episode, because also I was like, oh, I am so ready for this episode to be like fully action oriented. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, if this is a full action episode, Sean's gonna hate it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was balancing it, and then I'm like, oh, this isn't a mainly like action episode. This is like character driven. So Sean will like this. But I wanted action.
And I will also tell you, I was holding back till we get to that segment. But remember, I said I did have a couple nitpick complaints.
Of course.
And my biggest one was the action sequence. It was my biggest complaint.
I thought so too. I think someone.
Oh yeah, no.
Someone pointed that out too. I was like, oh, Sean's going to probably not like the scene, and yeah. But since you were talking about mourning, that's the first thing that you know. So normally in the last two episodes, episode 1 and 2, there's a flashback scene. It starts in 2003. Pretty much the outbreak. But they decided to go with 2023. They jumbled things up in this episode, but they start out with the present, and we continue with Joel and Ellie. Joel mourning, and then they have a little. Joel and Ellie talk to each other about pretty much Tess. Like she's like, it's not my fault. Don't blame this on me. I didn't want to be part of this. And Joel's like, nods. It's like, yeah, I get it.
Also, that's a really good bit of dialogue from both characters there.
Yes.
Because a lot of people might not think about this, but it's really important that she's like, no, you don't pin this on me. This wasn't my fault.
Yeah. In general, what do you think of, like, of Joel and Ellie's characters' relationship? Sean.
No, it's conflicted. Like, I think it's, to follow up on the specific point of him maybe blaming her. Mm-hmm. I think that it's a natural thing for someone to do, but it's also an unfair thing for someone to do, because it's almost nothing is entirely one person's fault. It's not like there's no fault of hers, right? It
Correct.
is possible that she could have convinced him not to watch her, or been more careful in the building, or been there are things she theoretically could have done, but there's also things Joel theoretically could have done, and a definitive thing like not even take this mission. So it takes this mix of decisions that people made and random coincidences add up to where we're at in our lives, and it's rare that one person's one action is solely responsible.
Yeah.
But I feel like Joel is wise enough to not really blame her like that. There might be a little emotional, conflicted piece of him inside that wants to do that or does it for a moment, but I think she's too worried about it. I think he's beyond that. Yeah. But she's not that wise. It makes sense for her to be worried about it. She's probably seen that type of thing happen before, and he is kind of gruff, and at this point hard to really know, or for her to properly predict or understand or whatever. So I agree, Horn. It was a good conversation. It was realistic and important for them to give us that scene.
Right. Also, I mean, this kind of goes back to episode 2, but she's the one who technically got alerted the clickers, but Joel should have told her. But you complain about this. You're like, why didn't he tell her?
Yeah.
So it was his. You could argue it was his fault. So it's like it's hard to pinpoint whose fault it really was. Because everyone makes mistakes and all that.
I mean, if you're going to blame someone in that scenario, I think you blame the 50-year-old experienced veteran.
Exactly.
Not the 14-year-old girl that doesn't know what you know what I mean?
Exactly. No, very fair. But they're walking. It's kind of neat that they spend some time of them just walking, like they don't run into any infected or any people, like a lot of the places are just rural, like dead. I kind of like that. So you got to get some neat cinematography, landscapes. And they have
it's also way more realistic. The fact is, most of the land on Earth is empty.
Exactly.
There are no people for miles, 20, 50 miles. Like if you just drive through the countryside anytime. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if this is still true, but at one point, I don't know, 10 years or so or whatever, you could fit the entire population of the United States in Washington, D.C. Just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
now the entire population of the United States and Washington D.C., the sewage system couldn't handle it, right? It would be how do you chip food? They're like you couldn't like live your lives there, but they could fit. The people could fit in that space.
Yeah.
Now think how much space there is just driving through cornfields in Iowa.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Most of the land is just empty of people.
Even in California is a big place. I'm talking about like with population, and there are places that you could drive 2-3 hours and it's just dead. Like it's like cornfields.
No
like
one, nothing around. Yeah. And even if you let loose zombies wandering in random directions, they still can't cover that many square miles. Chances are you're just not going to run into anybody.
Yes. So yeah, it was just nice. They do talk about a couple things too in the scene. Actually, no, that's after. They run into the Cumberland Farms. It's like it takes about 5 hours. It looks like, or maybe it takes 5 hours to get from where they started to get to Bill's. Like it's a long walk in the first place. But there's like checkpoints. It looks like that Joel has that he goes to every so often. This one I think he hasn't been in a couple of years. It looks like he has equipment, which I remember you complaining. They're like, why don't they grab stuff in the first place? But I could be wrong on this. But I thought about it. I'm like, maybe he doesn't grab too much stuff because it's heavy. He walks multiple hours and it's just exhausting to carry. Like I said, I could be wrong. You would know more about this because you were in the military or army or whatever. So I feel like you would have a better perspective on that. But
well, here's a couple thoughts. One is they don't have to carry it the whole way. They even stopped at like a stash point.
Yes,
he could find new stash points. There's all kinds of ways he could like get the stuff and figure out how to carry it or store it later.
Yeah.
And also some things like water or food you would consume along the way. It doesn't keep being heavy the whole time.
Yeah.
Something like a 5-gallon jug of gasoline, maybe that's unrealistic. But one grenade, you could have grabbed one grenade.
That's fair. That's fair.
I will say that carrying 30 pounds of stuff is not unreasonable. It's not like it's light, and it's probably tougher for a young girl than a grown man.
Yeah.
But 30 pounds of stuff is a very reasonable amount of stuff to carry. And I think it's been a while, and they might have changed the standards, but I seem to remember you had to be able to do a 20K, which is about 12 miles, with a 35-pound rucksack, plus your helmet and your weapon, water. You end up carrying at least 50 pounds worth of stuff. Like this is like you had to go 20K in 4 hours.
But you're also not 56.
Yeah, but 56-year-old generals led the pack.
Okay, fair.
Okay.
And he's not like sitting around drinking beer, watching TV, right? He's active and healthy and tough,
That's true.
Now, again, she's a 14-year-old girl. She's not exactly, unfit, but still, her shoulders aren't as broad. She hasn't had as much time to build muscle, but still, he could carry it. She doesn't have to carry it all.
Yeah.
Now, I would expect most people, I think 10 miles in 1 hour is a pretty brisk pace that most people couldn't do, or maybe they could do for 1 hour in good weather, but it's hard to do that continuously for 5 hours. It's hard to do it if it's hot. You definitely would need water if you're going quick and it's hot. So I did think about how far they went, by the way, the fact that they went for 5 hours. I was trying to think if they went, I doubt that there's almost no way they were able to cover 50 miles, but probably easily 25 mile. Easily, I don't know how to define. If you get a blister on your foot, if your shoes aren't good, there's a lot of factors. A lot of little things could go wrong, and it would severely slow them down.
Right.
But one grenade is not the difference in making it.
That's completely fair.
In saving your life.
I do like how he has this gun, and he's like, I don't have the bolts for this. Why hold this? Even if I have 10. It's not worth it, so he hides it,
because you could sell it. Like if a good gun, you could still sell it and make some money off of.
I'm telling you, carrying that thing for hours, it's so tiring. So I'm surprised you didn't just chuck it on the side of the road. I'm telling you, it's heavy. It's heavy. Carrying something like that, it's not, and that's another thing too. Like you don't realize how heavy something. It's like. It's not like it's 40 pounds. It's probably only like, I don't know, maybe 7 pounds. But think of a jug of milk. Think of a gallon of milk. I think that's around like 5 pounds.
Yeah.
Imagine walking for a mile with that. You'd be constantly like switching your hands and like trying to stretch your shoulder. You would just get tired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The longer you carry something, the heavier it gets.
Yeah.
And it makes you more of a target. You know, like if someone in a distance who might want to come talk to you and be friends or not think of you as a threat sees you with a machine gun, they're like, let's take them out now before they get close, or let's not be their friend. Let's stay away from them. Like you just, you disrupt potential interactions you could have with someone.
Yeah.
You shoot it and it draws attention. It makes a bunch of noise that clickers can hear, or human bandits can hear.
No, completely fair. Of course, when they're in the farmer's market, you know, this little market, Ellie finds like a hidden floor underneath our hidden basement and finds.
Be clear, that was not a farmer's market. That was a convenience store, maybe.
It's Cumberland Farms, they call it. You're right. It's like,
but I think that was just a convenience store around Cumberland Farms. Cumberland Farms might be the name of a county or a city.
It said it on the sign.
Yeah, just like when you're driving into any city, like "Welcome to Fayetteville."
Oh no.
Entering.
I was referring to on the building, like it looked like a sign.
Cumberland Farms.
It probably was.
Yeah. Sorry, anyway. But
anyway, I'm not sure, but it didn't seem as much like a farmer's market to me as a convenience store.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
So almost like a gasoline station.
Yeah.
But she goes down there and finds an infected, and kills it. Every time they like cut open those things and you see like the fungus or whatever inside, it's just disgusting. It's a cool little detail. It's also still really nasty. But the point is, she's not scared to kill. You know, like it's almost like a parallel to Sarah, who I feel like if Joel's daughter was still alive, she may have problems, at least up front. You know, but Ellie seems to be fine.
She's less scared now than she was before.
Yeah.
Sarah might be less scared now that she went. Once you've seen the danger, once you've seen people be killed by them, when this one is completely incapacitated, I wonder if Sarah would have also at this point been willing to kill it, and if Ellie was so willing 3 days ago, you know.
Right.
Well, also, right before she kills it, she like cuts open its head just to look at the fungus beneath.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that she might like either cut her own arm or her arm might get cut, and then she will look to see at what the cordyceps are doing under her skin.
Yeah,
it could be a sort of foreshadowing, yeah.
Yeah, because I actually don't know. I assume it's the same, but maybe not. I have no clue.
She got bit. It seems like she has a mark on her arm for something in the past.
Yeah.
And she got bit again in that same spot.
Yes.
And it seemed to bleed. It seemed to have a scab or whatever. So
that's fair.
That makes me think it's not going to be right now like that zombie she killed was. I also do want to point out that was sort of an interesting moment. I don't know how much the show meant this or what to read into it, but especially because Ellie did ask Joel at some other point, like, do you ever feel bad killing them, knowing that they used to be people? She said something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if she felt the same way. I wonder if she felt some fear or guilt, or she's just accepting like this is just a monster now. It's not a person. I wonder if she or we are supposed to feel bad for it being in pain and suffering like it is, whether it's a person or not, you know? Like,
and also, maybe she felt some kind of connection. Maybe she does have some sort of a connection with the infected because she is kind of technically bit, but like is not at the same time.
Yeah, I do wonder, how much of a connection she does have with the infected.
So can I just say I love how they prosthetic the infected to have like the skin almost like bulging out, like there is something just underneath almost pushing out of the skin.
Yeah.
So
they continue walking and they have a discussion about the outbreak and what happened, or at least what Joel thinks happened, from reports or whatnot. And it's pretty much what we talked about, how it's most likely got into the flour and spread around the world. And you do have to be bitten, like at least in the show, you have to 100% be bitten in order for it to transfer versus in the air or something like that. Like they felt like they made a point of saying, this is how it actually gets, how you get infected. Or I guess you theoretically could eat the bread, or whatever happened. But I feel like that's not, all that stuff is gone now. I am curious about the bread, like can you still get infected? Is the bread still bad or not? But obviously the point is if you get bitten, you'll get infected. So that was a nice, at least like just like tell us exactly what they think is going on in the world.
Confirmation of that theory.
Yes.
Well, they even showed they focused heavily on the food that Bill was making.
Mm-hmm.
Notice that nothing related to bread.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
All he had was meat, potatoes, and veggies.
And it was also fresh. Like when he had a garden, greenhouse. They killed the meat. He had things to kill meat, so it was all like actually fresh. But yeah, that's a good point.
Wine wasn't fresh.
That is true.
That is true, but it also doesn't have to do with flour. But yeah, it is.
But
maybe whiskey.
But then they brought up, and I don't know, what your guys' thoughts on this, but about how the government pretty much they say, another fact is, if a person is dead, they can't get infected. This is actually very different than zombies, because zombies, if you die, you still could come back. So this is showing a clear difference between the two. This world's infected versus an actual zombie. But the government, like brought people to a QZ, and if they couldn't fit them, they killed them. And I don't know. Well, what are your thoughts on that? In general, obviously it's dark, and I even wondered. I'm like, would they actually do that? That's pretty.
Wait, say that again.
The government would put people into QZ, into the quarantine zones, but if they couldn't fit in the quarantine zones, they pretty much killed them. They drove them out to a field.
They had enough food and water and beds or whatever for 380 people, and 400 people showed up, so they just killed the other 20.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It seems extreme, and obviously Ellie was like, "Why would they do that? That just seems pointless." But then he's like, "Well, infected or people who are dead can't be infected." So do you do it to protect the other people who are safe? I obviously don't agree with this, but like I also don't know how realistic this would be. It seems like it could. I don't know. It's also showing that the government's really dark to do this in the first place.
I can imagine the scenario. I can imagine a bad leader or a desperate, situation where that might be a thing that happens. But it doesn't seem like it would be the way of the world. It doesn't seem like it would be like standard procedure. Like, how does killing those people protect the other people? The other people are already in a quarantine zone, and the other people are outside the quarantine zone. Okay, they can get infected or not. It doesn't matter. We're in a quarantine zone and we're safe.
Well,
right?
Going to a walk, a zombie, if one person gets bit, it can spread like wildfire in a camp, I meant. So I guess
if one person in the camp gets bit, but if you don't let them in the camp, what do you care what they do outside the camp?
I do wonder on how much they could damage a quarantine area. Like if there was a horde of them, I meant to say.
Like what does make sense is if 400 people show up and you only have room for 380.
Yeah.
And those last 20 people, you're like, sorry, you can't come in. And then those last 20 people start to riot. They start to like attack the guards and throw rocks and climb the fence. Well, then maybe you open fire, and at that point you're kind of defending yourself, and it's kind of unfair, and it's still dark. But it doesn't make sense that they would just like drive out in a field and execute them all.
Exactly.
Like, just leave them out in the field, So.
And this goes back to like, why did they bomb the cities? Well, if it's a shitty government, I guess they would. But and I feel like they're just telling that the government's just shitty. They don't really know how to deal with a situation like this, and they're inhuman. But anyways,
it's just so hard for me to
also can I just say this is kind of funny,
to like not provide enough medical care to people. It's another thing for the government to murder. Like, which person in the government you think like the mayor of Landon were like, all right, well, just start executing people now? You think Biden, Harris, Schaefer, like which politician do you think is like, okay, let's bomb Boston? And not just that, but his advisors, the Air Force, the pilots would all be like, yeah, you're right. Let's just go do that now. Like, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy that would happen.
That's fair.
I think it might happen in isolated scenarios here and there. Maybe after the 14th, that scenario I gave where we have room for 380, 400 show up, and the last 20 are like rioting and attacking. So they end up killing them in like a violent conflict. Maybe they even do overrun a compound or two and everyone gets infected. Maybe at some point, maybe if that happened enough times, it might become the policy.
Yeah.
I can see that, especially if the people running the quarantine zones got more and more jaded and more separated from the rest of society. But it still, even that seems like it would be something that ended up happening in a few spots, not something the government decided to do everywhere, every time, no matter what. I don't see it that way.
What were we gonna say, Horns?
I forgot.
No, I do wonder how much of the government actually was affected. Like, imagine if 90% of the government died within this 24, 48, at least a week, time. So the people who are left are just not good at.
I remember now. So one of the things you might not know, a lot of governments had a real bad response to the pandemic of the 1920s, the Spanish flu, and trying to come up with a good pandemic response was really important.
Okay.
In 2005, the World of Warcraft players had the blood curse pandemic. Are you familiar with that, Flint?
No, I don't know what this is.
So in 2005, World of Warcraft had a new update, and one of the raid bosses as long as you're in the raid zone, had a curse that would be put on players and their companions called the Blood Curse, which would deal consistent damage over time.
Okay.
And of course, if you're raiding, you're a high-level player with good armor. It's not going to do that much, but it's enough to be a threat.
Right.
Well, it did affect pets, and one pet died. Or not died. It got kind of cleansed, but not fully cleansed of the blood curse. And if you were near enough to somebody that was blood cursed, you too would be cursed.
So it's basically a virus.
Yeah, but it was supposed to be cleansed after you left the raid zone.
Okay.
Well, the pet didn't get cleansed, and they went out into the world, and all these low-level players that don't have the high-level gear started dying like flies.
That's an interesting bug.
It was a huge... And instead of just resetting the servers, because Blizzard, I guess, didn't know how to do that yet. I don't know why. But it was pandemonium. It was absolute chaos. And then, so people would try to quarantine them and, would literally just kill off players that came from cities near there. There were people that would troll and go to other cities with the virus on them, but they'd have, some cosmetic thing to hide the fact that they had the virus on them, and they'd get into the city and infect everyone.
Right.
It was awful. But what's actually really funny is a lot of the pandemic response team studies used that incident to learn how to try to contain or control a massive outbreak of a virus.
All right.
So people say that coronavirus might have been a lot worse in China if it hadn't been for that event. Because the people in China used those quarantine techniques to try to contain COVID. And it helped a lot. It slowed the spread of the disease drastically.
Now, are you saying that since this series took place, the outbreak happened in 2003 and not 2005 when World of Warcraft would have had this incident, that things...
They don't have that knowledge.
Learn that lesson?
Yeah. They haven't learned the lesson yet. So they're just like, well, I don't know. Guess we'll just kill them because we don't know if they're infected or not.
No, it's a tricky thing.
By the way, Eric, the idea of 90% of the government dying, it wouldn't be the 90 best % of the government.
No,
it would be an even random slice.
Yeah.
And even the worst 10% of the government, they're not murderers. They're not evil murderers. That's just not, the government isn't made up of people like that. So
no, I agree. But I thought I at least throw that in there.
True. But even in the early days of the outbreak, they're not sure who to be able to do that with. How to handle people. So, remember, they would have killed Joel and his daughter
before. It's not like there's never been an outbreak or disease or a limited capacity.
But an outbreak that completely makes people lose control and go ballistic.
I did hear
that. Is
I'm just saying it. I don't know why that equates to murdering innocent people in a field. You know,
I will say I heard this. There was a plague that happened in the 90s. I should know what this plague is. Supposedly they just killed people. I don't know how true this is. It's a big one. It's like trying to think of like the death plague or something like that.
Are you talking about Ebola?
1990s?
No. Like 1900s or 1930s or something like that. Somewhere around there, early 19.
Yeah. So the Spanish flu, the one I referenced earlier.
The Spanish flu, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how that was handled. I'm curious on if the people who made this game, you know, may have done research on older stuff to see how they would have handled it. I have no clue. I still am in agreement with you, Sean, that this wouldn't have been handled this way, because it just makes it out to seem like everyone's evil, and that's really not the case.
Yeah. I'm realizing that even as I say, like, everyone in the government is evil murderers, like, well, some people are. Some people are.
I have to admit,
power can corrupt as much as I can give examples of how scenarios have been handled in X way that's different from this game. I can also give scenarios of how some person got into power and was corrupt and executed millions of people, or maybe not millions, sometimes millions of people, just because they were evil and corrupt and powerful and somehow got in position. And so it can happen. But I still feel like it's a smaller scale thing that ends up happening in some spots where it's a desperate scenario. You have this like perfect storm of like a dangerous situation, a bad leader, you know, limited resources, whatever else, and it ends up happening.
I also did think about,
as opposed to like the president ordered everyone to do this. I think it's highly likely that at some quarantine zones, they can't hear the president. The radios aren't working.
That's true.
There's no phone lines anymore. They're just on their own trying to figure it out. And in a situation like that, if you had one person who was a little militaristic, had 3 friends that had their back, they all had guns, they might get away with doing some terrible things, especially if they really believe they were doing the right thing. So, or if the people that were supposedly innocent, and we see all these dead bodies in a field, maybe they were rioting, you know, maybe they were like attacking a truck that came in to bring supplies, and they were just jealous because whatever, you know, I could see this scenario.
I also thought about, this is going back to episode 2, there was a lady who made her whole life to research this type of thing, and her response was bomb. Now, obviously, you're saying that's like a smaller, kill everyone. She's not the only one who probably knew that. I'm talking about had the experience. In the U.S., we probably had 15, 20, maybe 100 people who knew this, and I can see the government getting with them, and they're like, just kill them. I don't know the 100%, but
I still disagree, because that's a different scenario. They're trying to keep it from spreading off that island. It was on an island. Once it's spread off the island, bombing doesn't work anymore.
I agree. Now, here's an interesting thought. Also, kind of, Frank made the joke of like, and you think the government are Nazis? And Bill's like, they are. Like, well, they are. They weren't always.
Now they are. Yeah.
That was a good
part
joke.
Of why I wanted to backpedal a little, because I realized that I think that is what they're really trying to show us here.
Yeah.
Whether or not it was like an instituted policy around the world or just an isolated incident here and there.
Yeah.
The idea is that in this scenario they've set up, you can't trust the authorities, that they are willing to murder.
Right.
Maybe also, you will find some quarantine zone that has a good leader and a good system, and they don't want to murder anybody, but you can't be sure of that, because at least sometimes they will murder people, and they can be, or at least perceived as Nazis. So they need to establish that as a legitimate concern for these characters.
Right.
I agree with that. I also think that this is the other thing that's really important to remember about this is that this is a fungus infection. This is not a viral infection. So there's not like she said, there is no vaccine, there is no cure. This is just, you have to kill everyone. And I'm sure there are other specialists around the world who basically have to agree with that conclusion. There is no cure for this. We just have to kill them. And then it becomes
quarantine them, you know.
And that's true, but they also don't have a way to test for it yet. They don't have a way to test to see if somebody's already infected or not. And they don't want to wait until people start going berserk for them to know that, that person's infected.
If they don't have a way to test for it, then how do they ever decide who to let into the quarantine zone or not?
Well, I think it was just like, if anybody's hurt, if anybody is being aggressive, just don't take any chances. I think that is their policy. It's a terrible policy. No, I'm not saying it's a good policy, but I think that might be the policy they started with.
Yeah, it might even be a good policy in the desperate situation when you have limited information and resources. Although I do want to point out, being fungus versus virus doesn't necessarily make it that different, right? Like there are viruses that we don't have cures for. There's no cure for AIDS. Right. And there are funguses we do have cures for. It's not like everyone dies of athlete's foot. Like there's medicine to put in there for athletes. That's a fungus, right? There are distinguishing it. But and I do think it's important that the solution that woman was saying when she was like bomb, I'm confident she wasn't saying that because that's the only way to deal with this is to kill everyone. I think she was saying that because the only way to keep everyone from dying is to kill everyone on this island.
Yeah. Now, also, was it an island? Because isn't this like a big place in...
Jakarta is an island.
Is it an island?
Yeah,
Okay.
Jakarta is an island.
Indonesia.
It's the capital of Indonesia, right? But an island. Okay.
Yes.
Which is an island nation.
Okay, cool.
Indonesia is like 400 islands, and one of them is Jakarta, and it has like a population of 200 million people.
And it processes about a third of the entire world's flour.
Mm-hmm.
Literally,
a lot of reasons it makes sense to pick that as a spot for the spread of the disease.
Makes sense. But obviously, going back to the show, they transitioned from a dead baby and mother to them being alive, and they just jumped. It's like 2003. That was just a neat transition. Film technique, storytelling. And that wasn't her. That was important. It was yes.
I also like that Joel did state that the world kind of went to shit within 3 days. Like how fast it was. Literally Friday night was the night it really got to the breaking point for the entire world. Mm-hmm. And by Monday, everything was gone, is what he said. It took a weekend for everything to go to shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I can understand why they would take such drastic measures. Like, literally the whole world is going to shit in a weekend. Like, that's terrifying. A terrifying thought to have.
Awesome. I mean, awesome, but yeah. Good point. So we get to meet Bill. Bill is thinks the government's out to get him, and he was like expecting this almost, and you could argue he was probably right to a degree at least. We don't know, at least the area that he was at seemed like it was probably bad. But we see him. He has traps. He traps. This is like it jumps like 4 years later. He traps a guy named Frank in one of his manholes. And they wind up basically having a relationship. I love the way they introduced him to dialogue. I thought was really nice. It's just Frank is a likable character. It seems to be a little bit more optimistic. While Bill's a more of a pessimist. Nice contrast, I guess, to the character development.
This isn't an Arby's. Arby's was a restaurant. They didn't give out free meals.
The acting was really good, I thought, on the two characters. And what I felt like made Frank more care or be intrigued by Bill was a song. He started playing a song on a piano, Frank. Long time, I think is the name of the song. And
mm-hmm.
And then he's like, you should play if you think I'm playing so bad, because he was not playing, great. And it was moving.
Well, no, he was just like, look, play a song and I'm gone. All right.
Yeah. He did a lot of, I felt like the almost like sales pitches, like just one more thing. But I found him very, very likable, Frank.
If I can, I have a couple comments here.
Yeah.
It was one of my complaints, by the way, is that I don't think hardly anyone, comprehends how difficult it would be to dig a hole that big. I don't think it's realistic for Bill to have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And even if he did, and we're supposed to get the idea that he built them like all around. I mean, I'm telling you that it's difficult, painstaking, backbreaking, long, hard work. there's no way he built more than one or two of those things. He would have started making them smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And they would need some sort of support system for the holes to maintain. When it rained, it would start to fill in and erode away.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like a massive hole, like 8 foot deep and 5 foot circumference. And like, it's unrealistic. And even if he did it, where's all the dirt from that hole? There'd be a big pile of dirt next to the hole that wasn't there, which also might give a... Anyway, that... Also, I can just accept the premise that he built the fences all around, but that hole was too much. I was like,
He could use the dirt for the food, the gardens. Anyway,
so how did he move all that dirt back and forth through the fence?
It was also 4 years, so like you could do a lot of 4 years.
He would still be working on it after 4 years. He could, I believe, all the other stuff, but those holes, man, that is too much.
I also thought it was only 1 or 2. Just I didn't think there was that.
So if it's only 1 or 2, what are the chances that Frank fell into one? It's a big. And Frank fell into it without breaking his ankle or getting a concussion or. It's a lot. It was a lot to swallow. I accept it as setup. I think I've said this before that I'm more okay with like some chance or coincidence setting up a plot line as opposed to resolving it, which is basically what they're doing there. So I'm like, okay. But I was kind of begrudging that setup.
That's fair. Sure.
I feel like a hole like that, you could fall down it and not break something or twist something.
Theoretically could, but it takes some chance and coincidence. I mean,
that's fair. But
say that think just it's almost as tall as like the second floor. Imagine like jumping off a staircase in a house. When you're like planning on it and you can see where you're landing and you can brace for the fall. It's almost that deep. It's almost that high. But he's just wandering through the woods and suddenly falls that distance without breaking or hurting anything. Like, I don't know.
Those just so you know, I think those were more made for the infected. Also, I mean, you just like brought this up, and I just started thinking, what if he did it on purpose? What if he fell in there on purpose because he was hungry? This looks like a secure place.
Wanted to be identified or whatever. Yeah.
There's no proof of that, but that would make more sense, and at least the realism factor, And
also, if he really was hungry, what if he had like just kind of fallen, like he just kind of slipped in?
That's more of a you're talking about he knew about it.
We don't see how he fell in.
Yeah.
The way he fell is very important, and for him not getting hurt.
There's one hole every 4 feet, which I don't believe
no,
he
exactly.
could have possibly dug.
That's
then what are the chances of him falling into one? But I can move past it, but it's the type of thing where you do one little thing like this, and like, let's keep going, but. The third, fourth time, I'm like, all right, I'm done with this. And I didn't really feel like that for this episode. I think they did it like maybe one more time. Whereas in a second episode, I think they did it like every other scene. I'm like, I was like groaning and rolling my eyes consistently in episode 2. Hardly at all in episode 1. A couple times in episode 3. So it's a nitpick. That's why I wanted to say it's a nitpick.
Yeah. Fair.
My other nitpick here is that they seem to be making him out to be like a wise expert, kind of coordinating and planning this well to keep himself isolated. But he's chopping firewood. That would draw so much attention. If he's burning fires, people would see that smoke from a huge distance and be drawn right to it. And so that's like another thing that irked me a little bit. But
yeah. I got the vibe.
I was going to say,
I don't know this 100%, but that is a small town. So even if someone saw it, they would have to be like if Joel took 5 hours to walk here. So maybe it's like just in the middle of nowhere, this place, and a guy who's scared of the government in the first place may find a smaller town. I kind of checked up to that, but I don't know, like it's just
you could see fire smoke from 10 miles away, I'm sure, in every direction.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, and maybe how other defenses set up, but, and that's, by the way, that's another one of my thoughts is that someone has to do is drive a truck through that fence,
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking, well, maybe everyone's out of gas and batteries and no one's got a truck. But in the beginning, there would have been a lot more trucks and gas and batteries. And the beginning is when he had less defenses up in the first place.
Yeah.
And he's starting fires to draw attention. Like, all right. I'll just try to get past all this. But I'll accept that they've set up this isolated community. And that's the other thing I wanted to say that's more of a positive thing is that Frank's showing up. Whether or not he had been charismatic or turned out to be gay or whatever else, just some companionship is nice. You know what I mean? Like on some level, even if he's happy to be alone, even if he's figured it out for himself or suspicious of strangers, me personally, at some point, I'd be like, man, someone should taste this asparagus. I am so proud of this garlic that I grew on my own, this pepper that I got out of a storage, a raid on a convenience, like just being able to piece the ingredients together to cook a good meal. You'd want to share that with somebody. You want to have a conversation with somebody. You'd want news from the outside world. So I that's another thing. I don't think it's a stretch for Frank to have been accepted by Bill there.
Yeah. I know that someone complained that I talked to about, he thought that the relationship at the beginning felt forced, or that like the actors felt awkward. And I told him, I'm like, Bill was resistant and Frank wasn't. I that's what I got, from it. It wasn't awkward. Well, it was awkward, but like it was more so that Bill was trying to hold back, he was scared, of going into a relationship.
Well, I was also thinking, don't forget about the time period. Homosexuality was not accepted back in 2003.
Yeah, more unaccepted. Yes,
a lot of that thought process is like when people complain about that kind of stuff. I'm like, you also have to remember this is 20 years ago. Like, people's ideals haven't become like ours have today. 20 years is a long time for a social, especially one that became so connected because of the internet and social media. Like, things like homosexuality would not have been as not grossly accepted, but like overly accepted as they are, because there wasn't those kind of connections at the time. So
even homosexuality has had basically a very quick turnaround of public opinion.
Yeah.
Like, and basically in 2-ish generations, it went from some abhorrent, hidden, disgusting thing to this out in the open, public, totally accepted thing.
That's
we
right.
haven't come around yet on sexism and racism yet, as quick as we did on homosexuality.
Right.
But even that fact, but still, to Horn's point, 20 years ago, we were still in that state of like uncertainty about that. But add to that, there's Bill seemed to be kind of a protected, isolated individual in the first place.
Yeah.
And then after the world falls apart, he probably hasn't talked to another human soul in years.
Correct.
And so it's reasonable to be a little awkward the first time you do talk to someone for the first time in years, when in the first place you're a solitary person also.
Yeah. And I
also Bill's I was gonna say, and also Bill's a little gun happy. I'm sure Frank is trying to be careful so he doesn't get his head blown off.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the performance, because I guess that if that was a complaint, is the actor's probably doing something right. If it's supposed to feel awkward, to some people, but anyways.
Oh, also, it was just great that both actors weren't like the typical gay person. They weren't like super lispy and high pitched and oh my god and feminine. Like, it was
real.
Like actual like real people, like a lot of gay people are. They're just real human beings that just happen to like the same sex.
Yeah.
I want to point out the other actor there. One is, most people know as Ron Swanson from Parks and Recs.
Yeah.
But that other guy, I don't think he's as well known, but he's a little more in the know right now because he was on White Lotus, which like swept the Emmys the past 2 years in a row. And so,
and also he played such a different role in White Lotus.
Yeah, yeah. And did a good job too. He's a good actor for sure. I've seen him popping up in a few other things too. So
that's awesome.
He's making a name for himself.
But yeah, basically their relationship blossoms, throughout years, let's see. It jumps to from the time he meets him, jumps 3 years later, and they're arguing. Like they go from like making love, I guess, or having sex, I guess not love right now, but to them fighting, which I thought was kind of funny, like the contrast of the relationship, I guess, it blossomed into like now they can fight. But Frank was just having nitpick issues. Like he's like, I want to pay attention to more things. I want to fix up stuff and all that. And Bill's like, no, you shouldn't be doing this. This is resource management may be bad, or stuff like that. And Frank, basically had to convince him into letting him do certain things that he wanted to do, you know. And he's like, "Oh, also I want to make friends. I've been talking to somebody on the radio." And his reaction was just pretty funny, you know, like
What?
Yeah, well, like even if I was in that situation, I would have had a similar. I don't have to be a conspiratist or something like that to know that that's just stupid, you know. So it's just a funny reaction, obviously.
And valid, like actually valid reaction.
Yeah. And obviously he was talking to Tess, which I don't know why I didn't catch that. Like when he said a girl, I was like, who the hell's the girl? I just assumed it was Joel, but I was like, oh yeah, of course it would be Tess. That makes a lot of sense, you know. And you get to see the relationship between these two parties, and how open Tess is like to the idea, just like Frank and Tess are on the same page. Well, it seemed like Joel and Bill were on the same page of being paranoid, but you should still work together. You're lucky that it was me. You know, like Joel made the point. I was like, you know, we're actually good people. You were pretty much lucky because this could have been very different, you know. But we should work together nonetheless. Thoughts on the scene?
Yeah, I think that it was it made sense how they were tying together. I appreciated that it reflected some pieces of real world relationships. How, like, you know, so someone's had enough, if you will. And so, especially when they're kind of like farther away than they think they are. Like two people can be in a good relationship where they understand and trust and believe and love each other or whatever, but there could still be something that's really irking one person and the other person is almost oblivious to. And a lot of times when that thing comes to light, 5 other things also come to light. Sometimes it's the end of the relationship, but sometimes you come out of it stronger than you were before.
Yeah.
One little thought that I had hovering in my mind for the whole episode is that I feel like they're a little selfish. I feel like it's hard for me to think of these characters with all these resources. and even if on some level you maybe give them credit for having built the resources themselves, first of all, that's not completely true. They're really using the resources of other people that were evacuated from their homes.
Yep.
And some of those people are probably still in a quarantine zone living pretty crappy lives. And Frank and Bill and Joel and Tess could make those people's lives better if they shared some of these resources they cultivated. But they're not. They're keeping it all for themselves. And not only that, they're killing anyone that tries to take it from them. Like, now, to be fair, that one scene where those bandits or whatever came up, maybe they were being violent in the first place.
Yeah.
But you got to wonder how many people get randomly killed in the traps that Bill set around that place that were good people just wandering along, fell in a hole and did get a concussion and just died. And Bill basically murdered them just so he could keep his stuff to himself. You know, like, I don't think the show wants us to think of them as villains, but I don't.
Well, I feel like a lot of the
heroes.
traps.
I think you have a hard time pitching them as heroes.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the traps should be really simple for a human to notice. Like, Frank said he hadn't eaten in 2 days, so he's hungry. He's tired. He might have not had water for 2 days, and like, I don't know if you know this, you can only live for 3 days without drinking water.
So anyone that's tired and hungry and thirsty might not notice the murderous trap that was set.
Yeah,
but
now,
Bill
seems
does
nice.
have.
That seems heroic.
I was just saying, Bill does have sensors, and he does go and check out. And of course, if somebody does spring one of his traps, it's probably good for him to clear it out and then reset the trap. It's not just good to leave it like that.
No, I will have to
what
agree.
I'm saying is that he could put a sign that innocent humans could read saying, "Beware of trap. Shotgun will go off if you trip this wire."
Yeah.
Right? And so the zombies aren't going to read the sign and look out for the tripwire, but innocent, hungry humans might.
Yeah. No,
but he's not worried about them. He's just worried about himself and his stuff.
I will agree with Sean. In the game, I think I died immediately to those traps. And I'm playing a game, you know? So,
it is hilarious watching a streamer die to those traps.
Yeah.
Chroma died to one too, and that was hilarious. I was laughing in the chat for like 3 minutes straight. It was too funny.
But also, you know, like if I died in a game, I'm pretty sure, because they're not easy, some of these traps. Also, you don't expect that. I mean, I guess you should. Maybe being cautious and all that, but like you just don't expect a shotgun or something, whatever that had the infected in the head to go off like that, that fast. I mean, I guess you could be happy that you died instantly, but like some of those are not easy to find, and
but like
that's
we
dangerous.
go through time, as the time jumps happen, we see that Bill has reinforced the protection around the place.
That is true.
Where what he could have done is take in more people to live with him and benefit from the resources they have. And those people could even help with guard duty or whatever. But he's not helping anyone. He chose one person, barely randomly chose one person to help. Screw everyone else.
But
I
also
can't help but think it's a little selfish way.
But I also understand the thought process behind that. The more humans are fallible creatures. The more humans you have in an area, the more likely there's going to be a mistake.
Yeah.
And so the more valuable his paranoia and precautions and experience are to be able to help people. Yeah. Right? No, that's what a hero would do. Yeah, right?
I think you're right. I don't think he's a hero. I don't think he's a bad guy, but I also don't think he's a good guy. Bill.
I think that's the point that they're trying to make is that there are no heroes in this apocalypse anymore. It's shitty people trying to survive their shitty lives.
You could argue that he's not even, he's more of the badder than the good for being selfish in this first place. So it's an interesting, to
be fair, topic. I'm being a little contrarian. It's just an idea I had in my mind that I couldn't help but want to think about. And
you're absolutely fine.
It's what the show's trying to do, but but maybe it is on some level. Like even someone who could or should or would be a good person is put in this position where it's hard to survive without being a bad person,
Yeah.
Well, I also think of it like this. Every doomsday prepper's dream is everyone else to be dead. They get to do whatever they want. And so half of this is just showing him being in his own heaven, being like, I was right, I survived, and I now have all this to myself.
And I could, you could also argue that he was the crazy loony person, the conspiratist, that everyone was like, yeah, whatever, dude. And then he's like, I told you, you didn't follow my, what was going to happen, what I think was going to happen, and it actually did happen. You deserve to die. I don't think that's a good mindset, but I can see him at least thinking that,
But every random person walking by his compound wasn't mad at him for his conspiracies. They're just random people that are hungry and tired and thirsty, and he's set up traps for them to die.
Yep.
Maybe there's a few people in his community that it makes sense for him to have that attitude about.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's fair for him to have that attitude towards everybody.
Yeah.
Also, I was watching a couple other reactors who did not play the games. And they didn't say their names right away, so they didn't really know who they were. Even though, like, me playing the game, I was like, I knew it was Bill immediately. I'm like, yeah, that's Bill.
Right.
But they were like, the second that Frank told him to go up and take a shower, they were thinking, oh yeah, now Frank's got to steal all this stuff and get out. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, he could do that. He could just go grab a gun, and then as soon as Bill gets out of the shower, just go into the shower and just shoot Bill. Like, he was in an extremely vulnerable point, and like, maybe that was something that Bill was always afraid of, being at that point.
When I rewatched it, I did. So, I've watched obviously Walking Dead and all the way through of Walking Dead. And if I didn't know anything about this game, I may have been a little bit more paranoid about how Frank could have acted. Like, could you trust him? Because people do act nice to get things, and then they backstab you. At least in The Walking Dead, that happened a good bit.
In the apocalypse, people, you don't ever know who's a shitty person.
Yeah. So I did try to. I started realizing that it's still a better person would go and beyond to, like, even if someone screwed them over, they wouldn't go kill him. A better person would not do that. And I'm not saying that's easy to do, but like, they would forgive him or still try to save him in a situation that's bad or whatever. But I do know that's the thing in the apocalypse. It's hard to trust people sometimes. The real motive. Luckily, Frank actually was just genuinely a good guy. Actually, he was probably a better guy than Bill. You could debate, about that, but there's a
Frank was similarly selfish. Frank stayed.
That's why I debated
Frank's
about that.
Ideas for Bill weren't like, let's find a way to share this with everyone else. His ideas were, let's find a way to make this better for ourselves. He was still.
No, maybe on both sides he knew Bill, and he just couldn't invite a billion people.
Bill wouldn't go along with. Yeah.
So he tried to get away with.
But still, you don't necessarily have to invite a million people in. You don't necessarily have to invite anyone in. I do feel like once a year you might find one or two people you could really trust.
Yeah.
But even if you don't, you could still have a system for shipping strawberries out to other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or whatever it is, leftover materials. He wanted to fix up the boutique store, the clothing store. Like, well, there's way more. Are Bill and Frank wearing women's clothes? Why not find a way to ship those women's clothes off to the quarantine zones where women could appreciate that?
And maybe it was, I'm curious on the trading aspect of Tess and him, what they arranged, what he traded. Because obviously we knew about the gun, but we don't know what else. We assume that they traded.
We know they set up some sort of trade system. Yeah, which I guess makes sense, but they could have just given it away if they're really selfless, if they're really heroic, if they're really friendly, good people. They've got way more than they need. They could, even if they trade it, they could still. No point was made of them trading stuff that benefited the community, right?
That's fair. That's fair. We get the scene of I think you complained about this, the fight scene, or the raiders attacking the compound, the town, and Bill gets
instead
shot.
Of being on top of a roof with his rifle shooting people safely from a distance, he's out in the middle of the road, like just running around in the middle of the road shooting it. It was just nonsense. I literally couldn't believe that was happening. It's like, what is this?
I think a good bit of people were probably like,
even if he's not like in the window of a house or on a roof, he could at least be behind a tree, laying down flat around a corner. There's like a million things he could have been doing.
When I rewatched it, by the way, I didn't know this 100%, but when I rewatched it, I wondered if he was wanting to get shot. It's a little hard because immediately after he was like dying, or it looked like he was going to die, he was like, you have to get with Tess or Joel. He kept making a point. No, he could have made that point because he thought he was going to die. But I wondered that's just dumb.
Well,
like you said,
actually,
being out there in the first place. So
they left a little bit of foreshadowing to what his suicide note was going to be in that moment, because he doesn't say call Tess and Joel. He says call Joel. He will keep you safe. Those were specifically his words.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So that was almost a foreshadowing to his suicide note, where he said, you and me are a lot alike. Once we have a mission, God help any MFers that get in our way.
Yeah. But obviously he survives this, and it jumps 10 years later to the present time, 2023. And Frank has what looks to be Parkinson's disease. I don't know that 100%, but it looked a lot like that. I did research, and people also speculate that's what he had, Parkinson's disease.
I didn't really research it, and I don't know, but Parkinson's crossed my mind. But a key trait of Parkinson's is like shaking like this.
Okay.
He had a little bit.
Your arms, but I didn't know. He didn't exactly have a steady hand.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, especially because it seemed like he was degenerating to the point he's wanting to end his life.
Yeah.
It seemed to me at that point he would just have no control over his limbs, and he didn't seem to be that way.
Okay.
He drank his glass of wine. He
that's fair.
was painting and stuff, So
it's probably just cancer, but we also
it might have been cerebral palsy.
Oh, that's also possible.
I didn't think it was cancer. I never got the vibe of cancer. I guess cancer could do that, but I got it looked like a particular disease that paralyzed him, to a degree. Obviously, he could do stuff, but like his hands, he couldn't like fist his hands together, make a fist. It looked like they were.
He couldn't walk.
Yeah,
and it's also possible that it's just a disease that we've just completely forgot about as a society, because we figured out the medicine or the treatment to make it better now. And because remember, again, 20 years of medicine is a long time. We've made such huge strides in medicine lately.
20 years in modern times, especially.
Yeah. Like
the difference between 1440 and 1460 is not that big, but the difference between 2003 and 2023 is pretty big.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just like, it might have been a disease that used to, like, it could almost, I don't want to say polio, because I'm like, the polio vaccine, got that in like the 80s or something, right? Like,
before then even.
Even before that.
Even if they could get,
he would have had it one way or the other.
They did have polio. Doesn't mean that the treatment's around anymore, or it's hard to get the treatment.
He would have got that at birth, or as a
vaccine. The only reason I said it's probably not polio is because we have something for polio now, and Frank specifically said even back before the pandemic, or even before all this, we didn't have a treatment for it.
Yeah,
so I'm thinking. So I'm trying to think. 2003
cerebral palsy and Parkinson's would both fit.
Okay.
Yes. But again,
anyway, whatever it was, it was incapacitating and degenerative, and
it was almost like a flip side too. You thought that Bill was going to die, and then you jump forward, and it's really Frank. And they even said that, like, Bill was older, Frank was younger. Obviously, Bill should die first, according to like their ages and all that. So,
quote unquote, should
he
should die first, running around in a street with no cover.
But obviously, Frank was the one who got this disease, and he wanted to end his life. He wanted to spend one really good day or good day with Bill before he passed.
Give me my last day.
Yeah.
But wait, this was another thing I slightly took issue with. I thought that it was, on some level, I do think that people should have the right to decide when they die, if that makes sense, But I felt like it was selfish on Frank's part. I felt like Bill clearly wasn't cool with this, and Frank was pushing for it. I made myself feel better about it by just deciding they must have had this or this type of conversation a few times already. Yeah. It's not the first time it's come up, but this was just the final time when Frank really means it and Bill has to accept it. But it did not make sense to me if this was the first time he just now decided this.
Right.
Well, we've already established that they're very selfish people. We've already discussed that.
That's true. Yeah. No, I completely agree, and I thought immediately that this was very selfish of Frank to do. But also, like, I mean, it's like someone on life support. Do you kill them? Do you let them die, or do you keep them in the thing? Now, obviously, this is a little different because he's still able to think and move and all that. But they're in. Maybe he just doesn't know when it's going to get like really bad. He just doesn't want Bill to go through this. It's also like,
even if someone is like not just in a coma on life support, if someone is just nearing the end of their life, they know that they have cancer or whatever, and that they only have a few months or years to live, and they can't take care of themselves anymore, and they just feel like a burden on society, and they just want to be done with it or whatever. Even that scenario has a lot of variables. Like, does this person have a spouse and kids that still love and care about them and want to spend time with them and visit them and take care of them and help? Is there is it a tax on the hospital and a nurse and a doctors who could be helping someone else that would benefit more from it? Like, there's all these sort of factors that go into it. But in this scenario here, he's not being a burden to the hospital.
Yeah,
he does have a loved one that will be hurt by this, and is there caring for. It's almost all the things that make it justifiable normally aren't here in this situation.
Right.
So one thing that makes it more understandable to me is if they've had this conversation multiple times, and this is it, he's finally had enough, which is easily something I can believe. It makes sense in a certain. And another thing you could add to it that I wish. Each of these things that I'm saying could have been addressed with a line of dialogue.
Yeah.
If he's in particular pain, if he's really suffering all the time, not just that he feels helpless or he can't walk, but that he's in pain constantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he has diarrhea 4 times a day, a migraine headache that never stops. He can't sleep at night, and he's starting to feel delusional paranoia because of lack of. He could. But all they had to do was have him say, "Look, this is coming. We've already talked about it. Just stick that line in there, and I feel better about it." All we have to hear is have him say, like, the pain I'm going through. I can't handle this anymore. Just put that line in there. And now those 2 lines combined make me be like, man, this is tough, but I get it. As opposed to like, man, this is really weird that he's doing this to his partner. Does that make sense? Just 2 lines of dialogue completely swing my opinion on the situation.
Right. That's fair. I do like the music they use in this the scene. Or the scenes.
Yes.
The
whole like montage of their life with the music is phenomenal.
Yeah. Like.
Oh, can we backtrack a little bit and talk about the best scene in the episode?
The strawberries.
The strawberries.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could have just said the best scene in the episode, but by saying that, you knew exactly what I was talking about. The framing, the cinematography. I'll bet that was the most painful thing to frame because they could only get it at just the right time because the sun was just peeking through the trees in the background, so it was made that perfect little beam.
Fair.
Like, everything about that scene was just perfect. The acting, like, even like the little like giggle that Bill gives off as he bites into the strawberry, finally getting to taste something like sweet for the first time in the pandemic or since the outbreak.
Yeah.
Like,
that,
I think that was, I almost want to say, I'm not going to say masterclass in cinematography, but I thought it was easily the best scene so far in the entire show.
I'd have to think about what I thought was the best scene. Like, I think that's a contender. I wouldn't begrudge anyone for picking it, but I don't think I would pick it. But
fair enough.
What I would pick. So,
my favorite shot in the show so far is still the car scene. He gave me a certain vibe or a thing that's like hard, I guess, to do, and they did it. Like isolation.
I think the thing that it gives that no other scene in the show has given is hope.
That's fair.
The strawberries.
Like, yeah. Like all the other scenes in this show feel really heavy and depressing. Like, even the car scene is really cool. It's really intensive. It really gets you into there. But you're seeing the world kind of just fall apart around you. So it's heavy. Like, but this is like the first really wholesome scene where everything just seems positive. It's just two people having a great time and eating strawberries in a field. Which it might be the last time we have anything like that in this show.
There's going to be one other time.
No spoilers.
I'm joking.
Well, we don't know how they're going to film everything.
I was sure even thinking about next episode there was going to be a strawberry scene, and now you spoiled it for me.
No, it's a blueberry.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm saying I was still saying I don't know if we're going to get that. I don't know how they're going to do stuff. It might be the last hopeful moment we have in the show, and that just means like we're going to get heavier. It's going to be darker, and even then, the scene was immediately followed by the bandit attack. Like, could that be foreshadowing that things are always going to get infinitely worse every time things seem to be going good?
That's a theme in Walking Dead. Oh man, this character, I love this scene. This scene was so good. A death scene next scene. You're like, what just happened? Anyways, but yeah, so they pretty much do a suicide mission with a sweet, yeah. I mean, it was very Romeo and Juliet when it comes right down to it, you know. I don't know if you noticed when the first dinner that they had together, they were opposite of each other. Like they're sitting on opposite ends, and then that last scene, they're sitting right next to each other. I thought that was like a nice parallel to when they first met to how they ended.
They also had the exact same meal.
Yep.
Played the same way and everything.
Yeah, played it the same way, same food and same beverage. They had that same wine.
And I remember watching this scene, this episode. I was like, I'm assuming that Frank's gonna die, but Bill's not, and they're just gonna have another episode, I guess, with Bill and when Joel gets there. So it didn't throw me out. But then when the scene was happening, I was like, I think he's killing himself. I think he poisoned his glass,
No, yeah. Throughout that entire scene, I was thinking, okay, so how does Bill stay alive through this? Like, if I was Bill in the scenario, I'd be like, no, you're not going without me. We're going together.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, I'm like, okay, but like they have to meet Bill, right? They're not gonna, because in the game they're with Bill for a significant amount of time. So I'm like expecting them. Yeah. I'm expecting that, and then like, oh well, he drank the poison too. I'm like, okay, so the poison may not work on him. Like
I had to think about
and
that.
then like, then no, he's actually just gone. I'm like, oh.
But then that's why I chucked it down. So I was like, what was important in the game? It was to get the car, to get the battery, so they could go find Tommy. I that was like the overall point. I'm like, they're probably doing the same thing. It's just
and resupply.
Yeah,
it was like they got all. He said you have access to all my weapons, and so they probably loaded up on some good stuff.
Yeah,
and since they have a car, they don't have to carry it like they would with the situation where you said, "Oh, I wish they had taken more stuff." They have a car now; they can put a lot of stuff in.
Yep. So obviously we get Joel and Ellie get to the Bill's place, and he leaves a note. And it was just funny scene. Like Ellie is like, "I'm just gonna read it if you're not gonna read it," you know. Just the acting.
No, he said go ahead.
Well, yeah, but like he could have just picked it up and read it. But for one, it's a great way of just telling what's on the note without like showing the note and us trying to read it really fast, you know.
Also, just
it's like a technique, I guess, of
Joel.
storytelling. Yeah.
I love that it's not just to whomever, but probably Joel and Tess. It's specifically to Joel.
Yeah. No, that is a funny little, almost comical thing. That's funny. But yes, I guess I'll be the whomever. But yeah, what's important is, you know, it's supposed to be Tess. Tess was supposed to be alive at this moment, you know, and it wasn't, you know, and that's like almost a sad thing at the end of all this. You know, Joel couldn't protect his partner. It's like another person he failed in life. He failed his daughter, he failed his girlfriend, whatever you want to call it, relationship, you know, and now he's forced to take care of this girl, you know, and what's he going to do, you know?
And probably failed his brother too, because his brother left him.
Yeah, that's true. There was some conflict of, you know, why his brother left in the first place. Thoughts, Sean, on any of this?
No, yeah, I think you guys pretty much covered. I don't think I have any other
that's fair
outstanding or unique takes on the rest of it.
But yeah,
I guess we should bring up another key little bit that occurred there. She got a gun.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
That's been like a motif of her asking if she can get one. He always says no, but she got one this time. So
and he did
see how that plays out.
He did lay out some rules. You know, we discussed some of them. But don't talk about our past is one of the rules. Follow my orders. And what's the other one I'm missing? Oh, don't show the scar or don't show the bite, because realistically, if someone sees that, you're dead. You know, you're most likely dead. So all this will be for nothing.
Which is another thing that wasn't in the game. He never said that to her.
That's fair.
He just said, we never talk about this ever. In fact, why don't we never bring up our past at all?
Yeah.
You stay with me at all times. Stay right behind me. And if I say to do something, always do it. Don't hesitate.
And I guess it's important to know that, like, this is the first time he's now, I feel like, taking responsibility for her. Like before, he's just like having her tag along almost like reluctantly, but now he's like he's setting ground rules because I am going to protect you as long as you follow my rules. You know,
I thought it was more just like along the lines of, yes. Before it was just he's dropping off cargo. Now he's like, no, we're in this for the long haul at this point. I guess let's just do this.
Yeah.
I think he's still a little conflicted.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But he's moving towards accepting responsibility for her, or however you want to state that. But
yeah,
it wouldn't be interesting if he was just going along with it at this point. Like if he wasn't conflicted, it wouldn't be fun.
I'm going to make a bold prediction.
Yes,
all three of those rules get broken. He's going to tell her to do something she doesn't do. They are going to talk about their past, and
someone's going to find the bite,
and someone is going to see that bite.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a dog, but you know, not. No, there will be. We'll see if you're right on that. Actually,
it's only a question of whether all three rules are broken next episode, or one next episode, one the next, or by the end of the season. But I'm confident all three of those rules will be broken probably sooner than later. It's also sets us a little. Oh, go ahead.
You made a comment about how you're worried about the trope of the young generation knowing so much that they're like they know everything. You remember that conversation?
Well,
you had?
Not so much young generation, but just characters in general, just being too good at too many things. And it's worse when it's someone young. I can believe someone who's in their 40s has gone through enough life and training experiences to be a good shot with a pistol and a rifle and know how to stunt drive a car and know how to fly a helicopter and know how to be a medic or whatever. You know what I mean? But I can't believe that even a soldier, even an 18-year-old soldier doesn't know all that yet, right?
Yeah.
But just, there's no way a 14-year-old girl knows all this. I was worried they might do that, but it does not seem like they're going to do that type of thing.
And that's how I was going to wrap it around too. I was like, what do you think of Elliot and that? In fact, I appreciated the point they made of him missing shots sometimes. That happens more often than you think. Yes, actually, that was a good bit of.
There's a reason machine guns and shotguns exist. Everyone is not a perfect shot.
Yes.
The more bullets you fire, the more likely you're to hit something.
In the clicker episode, or when he was fighting the clickers, he wasn't shooting them like perfect all the time. Like he was like all over the place. Almost like a nod to like it's just hard to shoot. And he made it,
especially in a traumatic situation.
Yeah,
and in close quarters, and
yeah. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Is there other predictions, Sean, that you think are going to happen now that you've seen 3 episodes?
I was about to say a second ago. It's not a solid prediction, but just something I'm thinking about the framework of the show. That they are now, and we kind of expected. I'm pretty sure I said in the first episode that I expected he's going to head towards his brother, who apparently is in Wyoming, and there'll be different stops in the middle.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the idea of like the hero's journey.
Yeah, and
that's what I started off expecting from this last episode, because part of the hero's journey usually is along the way you pick up items. They're like Luke Skywalker's saber, his lightsaber or whatever. Usually like you get like special items or equipment or whatever, and companions. Luke picks up Han and Obi-Wan and R2 and whatever. So I thought they were going to pick up Frank and or Bill. I thought that was going to be an expansion of their party that didn't happen. I still kind of expect it to happen, but I'm wondering at this point if by the end it's going to stay the two of them. Even if they pick someone up, I bet they don't stick. They're either going to be a Star Trek red shirt, or they're going to have some other mission they branch off onto or something. So I'm going to make that for now as a broad
prediction
that they don't expand their party much. Maybe their brother at the end of the season. That's what I'm thinking. In the last couple episodes, they're going to get to the brother, and he might not even join them either. He might have some passion, some love he's found, or some commitment he has to the home or whatever that he is in Wyoming. It might be beyond his connection to the brother or concern for the girl.
Right.
But in the meantime, I expect they're going to encounter other people that will temporarily join them, but end up not staying with them because they have some other mission or because they get killed. I am a little worried that the balance that I wanted between, like, I don't know how to say it's nonsense action and zombie horror versus character development or world building, drama, I think the balance is going to end up being every other episode. So far, that's a pattern.
I actually started thinking that myself because like
next episode is going to be a little more action horror, and I'm probably going to have more complaints. But
that's an overall prediction I had too. I was like, I wonder if it's going to be off on character development / the journey. Them moving.
By the end of next episode, that car is going to be beat to shit. That's my prediction. They're going to ram zombies into a wall and probably roll it over somewhere, and
Awesome. Anything else on your part, Warren?
Not before our spoiler talk for the games.
All right. So I guess we'll wrap it up, at least before the spoiler part. Thanks, Sean, for coming. If you don't know who Sean is, he has a channel, DancingSean, on YouTube.
And History of Westeros is that is my own channel, but most of the work I do is through History of Westeros, covering the world of George Martin, Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, all that stuff.
Yes.
I will be. They've announced the Academy Awards for Best Picture. All the all the categories, not just Best Picture, but
yeah.
But for the past couple years, I have made like a little 1-minute preview of all the nominees. I want to wait till we see who wins so I could say that as part of my description of all of them. But so I think that's like in March. So a month or so from now, I'll have 10 1-minute videos coming out for that.
Awesome. And we'll continue this discussion next week on episode 4 on Wednesday. Again, thanks, Sean. And we'll hit the predictions once he leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler
Right.
prediction.
See you, Flint. See you, Horn.
See ya. You take care. Fuck.
All right. So now we're into spoiler territory of games or future plots in the game.
He was right on the money.
Yes. I was laughing on like every bit of that, like 90% of that. Actually, I feel like everything he said.
Every single thing he said was dead accurate.
Actually, no, he did get one thing wrong. The car doesn't crash at the end of the episode. It's going to crash at the beginning, probably. But
not even probably, definitely.
Yes,
it was literally in the commercial. It was in the trailer for the episode.
Yes, now maybe it's going to be the first 15 or 20 minutes because they'll have something at the very beginning. I'm curious if they're going to have something else in 2003. If they're going to keep this pattern of showing the outbreak points and different things to know about the outbreak points, and then go into the episode. So I am predicting that there's going to be something else in 2003 that they're going to bring up. I just don't know what. Actually, maybe it has something to do with the Raiders. I'm wondering.
Maybe. But when he said, I think Ellie's going to break all 3 of the rules, I'm like, oh, yeah, no, she absolutely does.
Yeah.
When they go to Tommy's place, they definitely talk about their past. When she's about to get like chopped up by David, she has to reveal that she's infected.
Yes, I actually thought about that. Yes.
What was the third one? Or second one?
Breaking rules, bites.
Oh, get
talking
separated.
About past. Talking about past.
Get separated.
Yes.
Yeah, they do get separated for a bit.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're right on the past thing. It's going to be probably after the brothers. You know,
it's at the brothers.
Oh, you think they're going to? No, let me phrase it. I think that the brothers will have its own separate episode than the past episode because I think they're going to focus on whoever they got the actresses. They're going to want to really focus on it. If they intersplice them, now maybe the brothers will have 2 episodes, but if they have 1 episode, they're going to have them as 1 episode and the girl as another episode. I just think that they're not going to have that many cast members all at once. Important cast, points. But do you think it's going to be before or after if they, if the brothers have 1 episode?
Well, one of the things I remember happening, that was one of the biggest reasons of the turbine, was Tommy's wife, the woman that's in charge of everything, and he's kind of just her support guy. She shows Ellie the picture of Sarah.
Oh, so you think
she tells Ellie about it? And
okay, so what happened with Tommy then? Okay.
So that happened when you're at Tommy's place. He goes to talk with Tommy while they're trying to fix something at the power reactor.
Right.
And she's left alone with Tommy's wife while they go talk about horses.
So he still may never actually tell Joel then, if that's the case. If they keep to that. I forgot about that. So
what do you mean he will tell Joel?
I said that Ellie will tell Joel about her past. I don't think she will ever then, if that's the case.
Oh, no. Oh, no, that's different. I'm sorry. That's not happening for a while.
Okay.
Because she's probably not going to tell him until after the university, because that's where the DLC takes place, where she goes into her past with Riley and stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking about the Riley stuff.
The DLC takes place between the section where you control Ellie and the university. That's when it happens.
And that would be, you could even do it with the university, because I feel like that's not going to be, there's big moments in the university, but story plot.
No, you have to. So the whole point of the DLC, it shows she's taking care of Joel, and she's like, man, I can't fix this on my own. And she gets into a mall, and there's a military helicopter that gets downed. And she's like, oh, a military helicopter. Each of those are required to have a military grade health, like a a med pack in there. So she tries to maneuver around to get into the pilot seat to get that medical kit so that she can actually help Joel. That's like the whole point of the DLC, minus telling the story of, because like every time she's going around the mall, she's getting memories and visions back to when she and Riley broke into that place.
Okay, that's fair.
So that's the whole point of that mission. So if they do something like that, it's gonna be in that spot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in that, but that makes sense. Like I am going to play the DLC. I'm hoping
I've kind of just spoiled the DLC for you, but
the details are what matter. I'm talking about like when you watch it, even if you know everything, which I do know, at least to a degree, like if you play the game, you should at least, well, for one, that Riley's not here anymore and that Ellie is, and she was bit. So that's, I assume they're just going to follow along that, whatever that happened. It's just the details. I don't know if it's in the remastered, but I'm hoping it's in the remastered and you don't have to buy DLC on top of the remastered.
Yeah, I don't know. Chroma did not. No, I don't think it is. Because Chroma did that section and it went straight from the university scene to the scene where you're controlling Ellie.
Oh, let me read that. I think you have to beat the game, but then you could do the DLC afterwards, and I'm hoping that is part of the price of the, I have no clue.
We will see.
Yeah. Anyways, anything else?
You getting yes. So next episode, we're going to be introduced to the Raiders, and also to Henry and Sam.
I still think they're the episode after, or let me phrase that. I think they're going to be at the end of this episode. I'm hoping they're like early on, but I just have this feeling that they're not going to be introduced till like the last minute. We'll
they're literally introduced like a scene and a half after after they crash the car. Literally, they crash the car, you fight off those guys, you climb through this area, and then there's the truck that they have with the turret on top. Okay. And then they're like sneaking around it, and then they climb up through a window and they shimmy across a balcony, and then they run into Henry and Sam. It's literally like a 5-minute segment before that.
I am hoping that we do get a lot with those characters because they have a certain impact when I play the story, and I feel like you have to be with them long enough to hopefully have that impact.
True.
So we'll see if they get have one. If they're introduced next episode, they're definitely going to get more than one episode. Is my
absolutely. Now, do you think we're going to be introduced to the story of Ish at all?
Of who? Oh, you're talking about the Rat King?
The Rat guy, Rat Man.
Okay. I don't think so, but you know how they did this episode, and I meant to bring this up with Sean. This episode could have easily been in the game and not in a story as a written thing. Like they could have read this and it would have made so much sense, at least for the movie or the show. So I feel like if they
just
did
notes scattered around about that.
So if they did that with the Rat King, where we are introduced to the Rat King but never see him with the main characters, I think that would be basically a standalone episode, but you still get to see progress, I guess, as they go. I think it would be freaking awesome. That'd be such a unique way of telling a story in the game that hasn't been seen before. I don't think they're going to do it, but I think if they're going to do it, they should do it that way.
Yeah, like the story of Ish is easily the most heartbreaking in the series because it's a guy who starts off on a boat during the outbreak, and he's like, "Oh, well, that's bad. I'm going to stay out here as long as possible," and so he's fishing and stuff, and he has clean water, and he has a water filter, so like he's literally not hurting for supplies. But like after like a month, he starts running low on gas. And he's like, okay, I better go into the mainland, otherwise I'm gonna be stranded out in the middle of the ocean for the rest of my life. And so he beaches his boat, and he's like, well, hopefully society is fully crumbled, or like there's nothing left to worry about. And he makes his home in these like sewer areas, and that's how he survives, is like either he can lose people in the maze of the sewers or just shoot them.
Yep.
but he doesn't have the most supplies, and it's a little spooky. And there's a group of people that are in a village that are getting harassed by some bandits who are also the people that we are dealing with. And he's trading weapons for supplies and stuff, which is kind of similar to Bill and Frank's story that in the show.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, which is why we probably won't get it. But
you know what? It also could be 2003. The rat, the story, and it doesn't have to be that long. It could at least get the point across. So you give a nod to him, his story.
But I hope they better be at least enough. So like the thing is, as you go through the thing, you find out that he's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm tired of being alone. I'm gonna ask them to come move in, and we'll protect this area and live here. And they do, and he kind of falls in love with one of the ladies there that has some kids already but doesn't have a man or something. And he's teaching them how to be men, and also having a great time, and they're coming up with ideas. They're collecting rainwater. They have a whole apparatus for collecting rainwater. It's cool. And then we find out that the infected somehow got in. He's like, one mistake is all it took, which honestly would be a great thing to show, because it'd just be how easy it is for an encampment of normal people which would make Bill and Frank's isolation and selfishness make even more sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's parallels to what Sean was saying, and it would prove
and it would prove it right.
Yeah,
it would make them right, and I would like that as well. But also so one of the things we find is a playroom that was locked. You have to shiv it open to get it open, and you find that they said it was the kids and one of the guys with them. It wasn't Ish. It was one of the other guys saying, "I don't know who else is alive. We are stuck in here. There's no way out." And so apparently the kids and that guy died in there.
Right.
And we don't know what happened to Ish until we get out of there. And in one of the houses is Ish's last message.
Right.
Which is that fuck. It was what he was saying. He's like, I don't know who else is alive. Rachel is absolutely destroyed by the news that her kids are gone. I don't know what to do. And that was the last thing we read from Ish.
I do remember this. As you're going through, I was like, yeah, I remember the story, and it was.
And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
it's like because it's such a great thing. It's like, oh, he's all by himself. He's an isolationist, but he's a survivalist. Cool. Then he's like, you know what? Fuck it. I need company. Which is why I'm really afraid that they might not show it that much, even at all, because they basically told some of that storyline with Bill and Frank.
Right.
So I'm a little nervous, because if they don't have that, that's one of the better things from that game.
Now, to be fair too, I was worried about if they're going to show any of those, because there's multiple stories throughout the game, and I don't think they hit on any of them so far, if I'm correct.
Ooh, actually, you know what would be an interesting flashback scenario for this section? I don't remember how old Henry was in the game. Maybe he was 20 something.
Henry,
which means he was
right.
Henry and Sam.
Yeah. I think he was. I got the vibe he was in his 20s at most. So what we could do is a flashback to showing him and his family as they're going through, show how his parents were killed, whatever, and then show him with his party, and they're like, okay, cool, Fireflies. You know what? Fuck these government people. We're gonna go join the Fireflies. And then show how his 8 other party members with him and Sam all died, and then they're all alone, they're scared, and then that's when Joel and Ellie come into the room, and then he starts trying to kill him, because of course they don't see him as Joel and Ellie, they see him as 2 randoms. Yeah.
Or he sees Joel, he doesn't see Ellie at first, and they're like, oh, he's just another one of those asshole bandits or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're fighting, and then Joel's beating the shit out of him, and then Ellie convinces them to stop, and he's like, oh, you have a child with you. Yeah, they don't keep children. So yeah, you'd be fine. And that's what leads them to being there.
Yeah.
And we could see that more.
Yeah.
Which would be a little bit of an interesting perspective. Again, us only meeting Joel and Ellie at the point when Henry and Sam actually meet them.
Right.
That way we don't have to worry about how they got meted up with them. We get to see that. I don't know. I feel like that would be a more interesting way to introduce Henry and Sam, because that way we already know their story. They don't have to.
Sam is young,
Ellie's age, right? Sam is definitely born post-pandemic.
Yeah. I figured that Henry wasn't, but their parents basically would have to still be alive to a certain point. Whether they're dead
they're not. It's definitely going to be that.
Yeah.
They die at some point. They could die to the military, and that could be inspire them to join the Fireflies, or they could die to the bandits. Either way is interesting. Honestly, them dying to the military makes more sense because we don't have enough reasons to hate the military enough, which is a lie. But
No, I definitely think key characters are going to get a 2003 scenario. What was their point of view? And Henry, not Sam, but Henry will get that point of view. That is a guess.
But getting that point of view of Henry will get us more involved with Henry. It'll pad the runtime of the episode.
Oh man, the David and his group. I imagine getting a 2003 scenario of David. That'd be interesting also.
And of course they can, and that'll help us have a better time, because the David's exposition of talking about people sending people to the university was a little painful.
Yeah.
But it would be just a throwaway line in the episode for David, be like, hey, yo, we need you guys. We're desperate for some supplies. You guys need to go to the university.
Mm-hmm.
And then one guy comes back and be like, everyone else is dead. And it was like, was it Fedra? Was it some bandits? Like, no, it was two. It was an old dude and this girl.
Yeah.
it was two people.
I am really curious on what they're going to do with the David stuff, because that was one of my favorite parts of the game. David's such an interesting character in the game.
I agree.
So.
I'm gonna send you something that we need to play on screen, if you don't mind. You can play it through however you want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sending it to you through Discord, but we need to play it on stream.
Okay. Well, we'll figure out a time for that.
No. You should do it now.
I can't do it now.
Yeah, you can. You can't just pull up. It's a short little video. It's a minute long. You can't just pull it up. It's a fun gaming fact about The Last of Us. When they were trying to shoot the ending, Neil Druckmann, the director, was like, okay, Nolan North, something weird's gonna happen. I need you to just roll with it.
One quick gaming fact about the.
Give me a sec. I was not prepared to have that.
You see the video?
Oh, I see the video. I'm trying to see how to play. Do you want me to play it through stream or just listen to it?
You could download it onto your computer and then open it up in a window and then
wait a
add the
second.
window.
It's Discord. I could probably just pop it. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Give me one sec. See if I can see Discord. There it is. Oh, I don't know if I want to. There we go.
The Last of Us. During the shoot of an ending that would later on be scrapped, Neil Druckmann chose violence that day and decided to prank Troy Baker. How so? Well, he asked Merle Dandridge to go in a specific direction for this final shoot, and then told Troy that
no matter what happens in the scene, don't stop. Play it all the way through.
And what was the end result? Well, see the masterpiece for yourself.
Get away from her! Get away!
You can't save her. Even if you get her out of here, what then?
It's not for you.
You can still do the right thing.
Come on, Ellie. We gotta go.
What the hell?
Get you out of here. Your brain.
What the hell?
And that is.
What the hell? Okay, that's incredible. Troy Baker is a master class.
I had to share that.
That's so silly. I love it.
Yeah, I had to share that on stream. I couldn't let Sean be in here for that because
he wouldn't know what's going on.
Huge ending spoilers.
Yes, absolutely.
But you, as somebody that's played through the games, you know the context for that.
It's also just interesting seeing the behind the scenes of how they do that.
Neil Druckmann shows violence.
Well, anyways, that's awesome. I think we should probably end it right here. Again, we're going to be doing the next episode 4, next week on Wednesday around 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Horns and Sean. And we'll keep doing this until the show's over with. Thanks all for coming, and you all have a good night. Bye-bye.